day, everyone. My name is Rich Chester, and I'm the Director of Business Intelligence for LPA Software Solutions. It's my pleasure to be with you today to talk to you about the new features and functions available in IBM Cognos Analytics Release 8, otherwise known as version 11.0.8. Our agenda for today will start off talking in general about new data sources supported by the tool, about a feature called Design View that's part of datasets. We'll look at how users can now manage both their schedules and their subscriptions through the portal. The default action property is back in the tool for reports, so we'll look at how that works. In previous releases, Cognos Analytics was not able to use a data source with multiple connections or multiple sign-ons for data sources in dashboards or data modules. They did work in reporting in previous versions, but in this version now, they also work in dashboards and data modules. I'll show you how to share a folder, which is a new feature in this tool. On the world of dashboards and stories, I'll show you some additional style properties on visualizations that help you add contrast to labels. Also show you a sample story and how you can play it in kiosk mode. For reporting enhancements, I'll talk to you about latitude and longitude and that new layer that's been added to the map visualization. You can now run reports to XML output format. That again is something you could do in Cognos 10 that was not available in previous releases of Cognos 11 until now. I'll talk to you about adding custom images and custom image library to your Cognos implementation. I'll do a demonstration of how you would do that. And then finally, in the world of data modeling, the diagram in a data module has been changed. A couple of defaults are different, and the way that degrees of separation works is different. And then finally, just to let you know, the Cognos for Microsoft Office add-in for version 11 has been released. This is the add-in that allows you to embed report outputs from your Cognos 11 environment in your Microsoft Word documents, your Excel documents, or your PowerPoint documents. Throughout the webinar, you might have questions. Please go ahead and submit those questions using the WebEx chat feature. At the end of our webinar, I will hopefully reserve some time for questions and answers. I'll get to as many of those answers as I can while we're on the air. But any questions that you've submitted that I haven't gotten to while we're together for our hour today, I will follow up via email after the webinar with an answer. So everything submitted will get answered. So please go ahead and use that chat feature as we go along in the webinar. All of our webinars are recorded, including this one, and they're all available on lpa.com in our resources section. Some examples of some previous webinars that you might be interested in. We have a whole series on what's new in Cognos Analytics, and we've had that series since version 11.0.1. So all of those are available out there. We have 1 hour on data modules. We have an hour on dashboards in Cognos Analytics. But it's not just Cognos Analytics or Business Intelligence that we have webinars on. LPA also has webinars on financial performance management, on information management, on predictive analytics, and so on. All of those webinars are available to you free of charge. There's not even a registration that's required for you to go ahead and use out on the LPA website, as well as on our YouTube channel, and again for free, no registration required. So do take advantage of this important and valuable education source. Before we get into the meat of our presentation, I'd just like to quickly talk to you about ways LPA might be able to help you in your analytics journey, specifically around the use of business intelligence and Cognos Analytics. First of all, we could help you out relative to upgrading from Cognos 8, Cognos 10, or even from Cognos 11 versions to the latest version. Migrating your content, upgrading your framework models, upgrading your transformer cube models, your dynamic cube models, testing your content with you, helping you with go live and rollout. All of those are possible. And even those folks out there who are still using Cognos 7, impromptu, for example. We have a practice dedicated to migrating you from Impromptu to Cognos Analytics so that we can get your reports rewritten quickly and accurately as you make your journey. We also have a collection of managed services. We have a help desk that will provide you with how-to or development support if you wish. We also could take over the management of your Cognos Analytics server or servers, or any level in between. We do have a group of folks in Buffalo, New York that specialize in rapid creation of reports. So if you have a report backlog that you would like to address, you might find that our reporting services offering makes sense for you. Prior to upgrading, often people wish to know whether or not they're starting from a firm foundation, or you have upgraded, let's suppose, and you're encountering some issues. Maybe things are slow, maybe things are not as reliable as you wish. So we have a health check offering where we can come in, we can look at how the software is installed and tuned, we can look at how reports are written, we can look at how framework models are developed and help you understand opportunities there to create a faster or more reliable environment. And finally, we have a collection of training services to help you in terms of rolling out, let's say, Cognos 11, having migrated from 8 or 10. As you know, there's a different portal, a different way of doing things. Perhaps you want to teach some folks how to be self-service in terms of writing their reports. So we have some report authoring classes. Perhaps you'd like to learn how to write active reports. Or perhaps you want to use the new Cognos Analytics tools, dashboarding, or data modules. We have all of those courses and more. And any way that LPA can help, it would be our privilege to discuss with you and provide you with a quote. So do please reach out to us if you think that we could help you in any of these ways, or indeed in any other way that might make sense for you. So back to Release 8. And again, a reminder, please submit questions via the WebEx chat feature. I'll answer as many as I can at the end of our time together, and any that I don't get to answer on the air, I will answer afterwards via email. One thing about Release 8 that I guess is worth pointing out, and I understand this is also true for Release 9, and by the way, Release 9 is scheduled for the end of December, beginning of January, is that the focus of the release is primarily on stability. You might have noticed that the list of enhancements, while some great enhancements are in the list, is not as long or as widespread as some of the previous releases. That's because 11.0.8 is focused as much on stability of the product, firming it up, addressing some of the bugs that we have reported, as well as leveraging some new features and functions, specifically those features and functions that we, as end users, have asked IBM for through the Request for Enhancement, or RFE, community website. Now, if you're not familiar with the RFE website, this is an important asset, I think, that we should all be taking advantage of. It's an externally available website. You do have to register in order to submit an enhancement request, but this is the way by which we can inform IBM of the features and functions we would like added to the product. And IBM will take a look at these features and functions from the list and will respond to them in some way, especially those with a large number of votes. So the idea is you create your ID, you log into the website, you submit an enhancement request, and then folks can vote on the enhancement request. So while you're out there, you should browse what's out there and add your vote to those enhancements that make sense for you. The items with the most votes are the ones that are the most likely to be included in a future release. And many of the enhancements that we're going to be talking about today come from the high vote getters on the RFE community. So this is an asset that if you haven't had a chance to start using to submit your great ideas, I strongly encourage you to go ahead and do so. Certainly I use it and I vote and I submit. So, and some of the things that I voted for are in this Release 8, and we're going to talk about now. It seems to me that every new release of Cognos Analytics includes support for some additional data sources. So here is a list of some additional data sources that have been added into Release 8. Looks to me like there's a number of them that are cloud-based data sources, which is the way of the future, as you know. So there's the list for you. Nothing I'm going to necessarily demonstrate today. It's just the list of what's been added for your information. If you are interested in any of these, you can go ahead and take a screenshot of this slide to use some of the data on it later. When you create a data set, and as a reminder, a data set is an extract of a package or an extract from a data module that you can create by right-clicking on the package or the data module and choosing Create Data Set. Now, once you've created a data set, an extract, and you pick the columns you want, you add the filters to isolate the data that you're interested in extracting. You can then schedule the data set to automatically refresh that data on some cadence. Could be hourly, could be daily, could be weekly, whatever makes sense for your data set. The idea is that you're going to do this extract, and then you're going to leverage it either in a dashboard or in a data module. And then once it's in a data module, of course, it could be in a dashboard or a report. Heretofore, when you created a data set, you dragged columns from your package or your data module, and then you waited for that data to be retrieved. So drag, drop, wait, drag, drop, wait, drag, drop, wait. That was sort of the method of operation. Now, with this release, we actually can use the design view as opposed to the preview mode, which is what was available in previous releases, so that when we drag and drop, we're actually not retrieving data. You can switch to design mode from design mode, to page preview mode at any time to look at the data that would be retrieved. But now you could actually build your data set layout in this design mode, and that will actually speed things up quite a bit. Another enhancement that I think is, again, exactly one from this RFE site is the ability, again, for end users to manage their own schedules. In previous releases, end users have been able to manage their own subscriptions, and that's been part and parcel of the tool really since the beginning. But the ability to manage schedules that end users have created was not part of the Cognos Analytics product. In Cognos 10, there was a feature called My Activities and Schedules that was there, and that wasn't part of the features in Cognos Analytics until now. With Release 8, now end users up under their personal menu will have an entry called My Schedules and Subscriptions, and they'll be able to manage both their subscriptions and their schedules from this interface. And this interface is identical to the same one that administrators would use to manage all schedules and subscriptions in the system. In this case, though, they'd be isolated to the logged in user. So basically, everything old is new again. So this Cognos 10 functionality has been added back into the product. Another Cognos 10 function that was not in the product until this release is the ability to say, when I click on the name of a report, this could be a reporting report, one that you upgraded from Report Studio, could be a Query Studio or Analysis Studio report, could even be a Power Play Studio report if you happen to own that product. Every one of those types of reports has a property now called the default portal action. And what that does is it says what happens when you click on the name of the report in the portal. And there's three options in general. There is view any saved output. And that is the default actually for your reporting reports and also any of your upgraded Report Studio or Workspace Advanced reports. There is run the report regardless of whether there is a saved output. Run the report and get quote unquote fresh data. So run it right now, if you will. And the other one is to actually open the report in the appropriate editing tool. So those are the three different options that are out there. And any of those options now can be set. So this property was part of Cognos 10. It was not a property in 11 until this release, and now it is. In the Cognos BI and Cognos Analytics world, it is possible for you to create a data source that contains multiple connection strings and or multiple sign-ons. Now, the multiple connection string capability I've used for different clients. For group 1 of users, you want them to go to database 1. For group 2 of users, you want them to go to database 2. This has been available in Cognos since at least Cognos 8. It might even have been part of Cognos ReportNet. This notion of sign-ons is, so maybe I get to database 1, but I want to sign in with a particular user ID when I get there. But when my colleague uses database 1, we want him to sign in with a different user ID. And perhaps that's because maybe there's some security associated with the user IDs that we connect to these databases. The capability to do this has been part of Cognos Analytics since the beginning. However, you could only leverage such data source connections heretofore in reports. With Cognos Release 8, they've added the ability to use data sources with either multiple connection strings or multiple sign-ons in dashboards and data modules. So if you will, there was a gap here that they only worked with reports before. But now you can also leverage these data sources in data modules and dashboards. It's possible now to share a folder. In a previous release, IBM introduced a share and an embed function on reports and dashboards. Right-click on a report or click the More button on a report or dashboard, and you would have a share and an embed. Share gives you a hyperlink that you can copy and paste into literally anything that would support presenting a hyperlink. Let's say an email, for example, when you wanted to send a link to a particular report to another user. That's what share was. Embed actually gave you code where you could maybe embed the display of the report inside a web page. If you will, it created essentially the code to embed an iframe in a web page. But you couldn't do that on folders until this release. Now when you right-click or click the More button on a folder, there's an entry called share that will create a hyperlink like the one shown on the screen. You can copy and paste that, and then you could, if you will, give that link. I'm going to use email as my example. I could send an email to a colleague, and then there would be a link in the email. They click on that link, and it will open that folder for them in Cognos Analytics. Now, there is a couple of security things that would have to be true for the link to work. Just like a link to a report or a dashboard has some security things that must be true. First thing is that the end users need to be able to access the report or the folder you're sharing. So security has to be such that they have access to it. So sharing something from your My Content with another person never will work because no one else has access to your My Content unless they log in as you. But even sharing something from the team content is still dependent on the person clicking the link being able to access the item you're sharing. The other thing, of course, is they have to be able to log into Cognos Analytics in the first place. They have to have valid credentials to log in to the portal in order to access anything. So security is always on. These share links just give you a convenient way to give folks direct access to a report, a dashboard, or now a folder in Cognos Analytics. When you create visualizations in a dashboard, and there's been some of these properties also added to visualizations in a report, by the way, so it's not just a dashboard enhancement, you sometimes find that the labels and the palette of the visualization don't work well together. So in an attempt to continue to improve the visual appeal of the visualizations that you could create, more properties have been added to property sheets specific to the labels. And it would be the contrast label color property and the label shadow property. So in the pictures here, I've attempted to show you how these work. So this is a visualization in a dashboard, and you'll notice that the labels are all black. And this camping equipment label here is a little bit hard to see because I've got a reasonably dark blue with a black label. So if I turn on contrast label color, if I enable this checkbox, you'll see that Cognos looks at the palette and the label colors and attempts to increase the contrast, to adjust the color of the label specifically, not of the palette on the visualization, so that the label can stand out more clearly in the visualization. So that's what contrast label color does, is it will change the color of your label based on the color of the object that the label is being displayed in. Now, label shadow adds a shadow effect to the label. So if we look at golf equipment here, you might note here from the picture that golf equipment now has a drop shadow behind it. So those are two new properties added in the dashboard world and in the report world. It's not on every visualization. It's only on some visualizations that you will find these particular properties. In the world of stories, which we have not spent a whole lot of time on in this webinar series, and by the way, if you are interested in a webinar specifically on the stories feature in Cognos Analytics, please just throw in the WebEx chat window a request for that webinar. If I get enough folks submitting that request today through the chat, then I will plan on one of these webinars devoted specifically to the creation of stories. But in the meantime, stories use the same basic technology as dashboards, but you add animation and timing. Think PowerPoint presentations with fly-ins and fly-outs and timing some when things fly in and fly out and when slides change. Well, you can do the same thing with effectively the components of a dashboard. That capability has been around the last several releases. In this release, what they've done is they've given us what I call a kiosk mode capability. So in the screen here, the screenshot, it shows there's a play all scenes button that's been added and a loop button that's been added. So heretofore, you would click on the play button and go scene to scene to scene. And if you wanted to start over, you would reset, you'd hit rewind, and you click play again from scene to scene to scene. So if you were effectively in charge of advancing the story. Now with these two features, you can click play all scenes, and once you click the play button, all the scenes you've defined in your story will play, beginning to end. Now, if you then also turn on the loop function, once it hits the end, it will automatically restart at the beginning and replay your story. So with both of those turned on, you could imagine setting up a kiosk, right, hitting play and having your story continue on its own and loop so that it will run in the background, if you will. In my head, I'm thinking like trade show kind of functionality. This little arrow here, this is the full screen mode arrow. So I assume you would turn these both on, hit play, go to full screen mode, and there you've got your kiosk. So those are new capabilities in the world of stories. One of the big things in the spatial analytics that I think we've all been waiting for when it comes to the Mapbox based maps that IBM has embedded in dashboards and in reports as of last release is the ability to map by latitude and longitude, by coordinate. In dashboards and reports through release 7, you could map all the way down to the zip code level in your maps. With release 8, you can now map in reports only at this time, a layer where you could plot points based on coordinates, latitude and longitude. Now there's 3 layers in the maps and reporting. There's a region layer where you would color a region based on a measure, and that region could be a country, a state, a city, a zip code. There is a point layer where you could plot a point based on a city, a state, a zip code, a country, and that point would be colored based on a measure and sized based on a measure. Now with release 8, we have this 3rd layer, latitude and longitude, where you would be able to plot again a point, but the point would be at a particular latitude and longitude. And again, you can size the point at that coordinate or color the point at that coordinate based on a measure. And then you also will can specify, as you see from the property sheet on the screen, how to label the coordinate, because 50 degrees by negative 45 degrees is not often a sufficient description of the point. So you might want to have a label there. Now you can use all three labels on a map, or all three layers, pardon me, on a map. You could do regions, endpoints, and latitude and longitude if you wish, or you could use one or two of them. So I'll do a demonstration of some mapping using latitude and longitude in a moment. Have you ever wanted a quick way to access certain images, like maybe your company logo, available in a report or a dashboard? It turns out that with release 7, it was possible to, quote unquote, easily add an image library to the tool. So that was introduced in dashboards in release 7. In release 8, they have increased that capability to now be able to create a image library that would be available in both reports and dashboards. So I'm going to show you how to go ahead and create one of these image galleries in one of my demonstrations. I won't make you sit through me typing in code, but I'll show you the process. We'll upload the image library I've created, and I'll show you how it works in a report. And finally, the data module diagram has been changed in the product. So heretofore, the diagram has had the ability to show cardinality and to set degrees of separation. But the default in the diagram on a data module has been not to show cardinality and to have the degrees of separation set to infinity. In other words, it did not filter the diagram based on the degrees of separation by default. And you actually had to click a button to show this little dialog that's here in the corner. Now with release 8, they are actually always showing you this dialog that allows you to enable cardinality and set degrees of separation. And the default has changed so that the cardinality is enabled and the degrees of separation are set to 1. Now, cardinality is this 1 to n circle. If cardinality is unchecked, what you'd see is the line, but you wouldn't see that the relationship is a one-to-many relationship between country and conversion rate. You can turn that off if you wish. By default, it's now on. Degrees of separation works like this. In the diagram, you select a table. In this case, I clicked on country. When the degrees of separation are set to 1, what that means is that the screen should show you all of the tables that are directly linked to the table I selected, in this case, country. So you can see that sales targets directly linked, sales region, branch, euro, currency, and conversion. Those are all directly linked to country. They are 1 degree away from the country table. Now, if I'd set the degrees of separation to 2, it would not only show me what's directly related to country, let's say sales target, it would also show me what is related to sales target, directly related to sales target. So it would be 1 and then 2 degrees of separation from country. Now, as you click around on different items in the diagram, the focus changes, and therefore the tables that will be highlighted will change to really isolate, in the case of 1 degree of separation, what is directly connected to the item I clicked. Now you can change all of the degrees of separation slider, and the very last entry there is quote unquote infinity, which means show me all the tables and their relationships. Notice that the tables that are out of scope of the degrees of separation are transparent. So they're always all to be seen. They're just not always highlighted. It's the degrees of separation that determines what will be highlighted. So with that as the exposition for what has been enhanced in the product, let's go ahead and do some demonstrations. So let's switch over to Cognos Analytics. And let's start off by creating a data set. Now, a data set is an extract of data from either a data module or a package. I'm going to go ahead and use a package. I'll use my Go Data Warehouse query package. Click on More, click Dataset. Now, I might create a data set because I want to isolate a particular set of data that I refresh on a cadence for use in a dashboard or a report. I might create a data set and auto-refresh it and use that rather than reading the data live, because perhaps reading the data live might cause an issue with the system that is managing it. Or perhaps reading the data live, while valuable, maybe is rather slow. And for a dashboard, right, clicking on a dashboard and opening it and then waiting 3, 4, 5, 8 minutes for data is not a great experience. And so instead of reading live data, maybe I would create a data set, schedule it to run every half hour, and use the data set in my dashboard instead. So it's near real-time data, but much snappier because data sets are stored in the Cognos Content Store. When I created a data set in previous releases, my experience was limited to this, which was I would define my data set by dragging over some data and dropping it. And you see it's retrieving the data as I go. Now, in my case here with my sample data, this is not a big problem because it's a rather fast data set. But in production data sets, I think we all know this drag, drop, wait activity, you could be waiting a substantial amount of time between drops, and that would make creating the data set a bit laborious. If that is your experience, if the drag and drop is taking too much time, you can now in Release 8 click here on the Page Views button and switch from Preview mode, which is the default mode, to Page Design. Now as you drag and drop items, you don't have to wait for the data to appear. You can simply go ahead and continue to design. And you only have to look at your data or retrieve the data when you save and load your data, or if you switch back from design mode to preview mode. And so in this way, creating your data set can be much more efficient. So that's the enhancement to the data set, is page design mode. I'll go ahead and just remove this data set, move on to another demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and create some schedules. So let me go down to some reports here. And one of the reports I'm going to schedule is this employee satisfaction report. So I'm going to go ahead to the property sheet, which is where schedules are in Cognos 11. I'll click on schedule and I will add a schedule. Remember, to be able to add a schedule to an object, you have to be able to update that object. I'm logged in as an administrator, so that's not a problem here. But your end users may not be able to add schedules if they can't modify the object they're scheduling. But I'll go ahead. I'm not going to use this schedule for anything except I want to create a schedule so that I can show you how end users can manage their schedules. So I've created a schedule on employee satisfaction. I'm going to go ahead and run my employee satisfactions report because I'm going to go ahead and subscribe to it. So I'll run it. And it's running and retrieving data now, and it will present the report for me. And I'll switch it from Americas to another, let's say Central Europe. And once it is updated, I'm going to subscribe to this Central Europe report by clicking on my More button and choosing Subscribe. Oh, I have to save it before, and that's because the package changed. There were unsaved changes. Now I will subscribe. Important note, you cannot subscribe to a report you've changed without saving those changes. I'll subscribe again. I'm not going to do anything particular with the subscription. I just want to have both a schedule and a subscription available for this next demo. Let me go ahead and remove this report. I'm going to click on this My Area options here. And one of the options used to be My Subscriptions. Now it's My Schedules and Subscriptions. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And what this will do is it will present me with my list of schedules and subscriptions. Now, if you don't know what a subscription is, in a nutshell, a subscription is a simple schedule. It is a simple schedule, and I always like to tell folks, for me. Whereas a schedule, a traditional schedule, could run the report in multiple formats and distribute that report to multiple people. And I could run on a weekly, a monthly, a yearly basis in a schedule. A subscription is simpler. It's a schedule that delivers to me and only to me. When I say it's delivered, let's say by email. And I could still run in multiple formats, but I can run on a daily or a weekly basis, but I couldn't schedule it monthly or schedule it yearly. So it's a simple scheduling mechanism. The important thing about a subscription is that as many people as wish can subscribe to the same report, whether they have update access to that report or no. So a schedule is limited in that it's one schedule per report, and the scheduler must be able to update the report. A subscription, any number of folks, whether they can update the report or not, could subscribe. Both of those objects, schedules and subscriptions, can be managed here. What do I mean by managed? Well, when you come down here, click on the More button. This is the schedule that I did on employee satisfaction. You see I can modify the cadence, I could change prompt values, I could change output formats, I could change delivery. I could disable it, that's temporarily stopping the schedule. I can delete the schedule entirely. This is my subscription. Here I could modify that subscription, I could disable it, I could remove it. So this gives me full control of all of my schedules as well as my subscriptions. Also up here I've got this drop down. I can see what's coming up. I can see what has happened already. Both of these ran because I created them and immediately said go. And I can see what's running right this minute, which right at the moment, of course, is nothing. And I can see if it's running in the background or if it's running interactively here. So this gives me a lot of control over seeing what's up with my schedules as well as managing them from a point of view of modification, disablement, and deletion. So great power. Had this in the My Activities and Schedules world in Cognos 10. It's now back with this release in Cognos 11 with 11.0.8. So that's subscriptions and schedules. Let's talk about this notion of a default action. Out here in Team Content, one of the reports that I've got out here is called Sales Growth Year Over Year. Now, this report I happened to ran earlier. So I'm going to go to More and I'm going to do View Versions. See, this report has an output. It happens to be an HTML output that's already stored with the report. Now, the reason that's important is because of the notion under Advanced of the default portal action. So this is the new guy. You see that the default setting, I didn't set this, this is what it was, is View Most Recent Report. What does that mean? That means that when I click on the name of the report here in the portal, it is going to examine, is there a saved output? And if the answer is yes, it will display the saved output. It will not run the report right now. If the answer is no, and it's set to View Most Recent Output, it will go ahead and run the report and retrieve new data. Now, since I just showed you, we have a saved output. When I click on the name, it's going to show me that saved output. What if, though, whether there's a saved output or not, I wish to always run the report right now when I click on the name? Well, I would need to change the properties, which, by the way, I could do right here. I need to change the property. In this case, what I need to do is change it from View Most Recent Report, which says if there is a stored output, show it, otherwise run it, to run the report. This says run it. Saved output, no saved output, doesn't matter. Run the report right this minute. Now with that change, I should be able to close my panel, come back here, and when I hit this guy, it should run the report right now, as opposed to show me the saved output. See, now I have control over that. Before this release, it was set to show current version, and that I couldn't change that. So if there was a saved version, it would always show it to me. In order to run it now, I had to use the Run As feature. Now you can set that. Now the third option is sometimes very useful. I think it's really useful, say, for Query Studio or PowerPlay Studio reports. But you have this third option here. and it is to edit the report in the appropriate editing tool. So I'm going to now click on it, and I would expect it to open in the report editing environment. And it validates the report when it opens it. And see, now I'm in the reporting tool, right? So 3 options now. The default may work for most of the time, but once in a while you may need to change that default. And because of this enhancement, you now have control like you did in Cognos 10. The next thing I'll show you is this notion of multiple connection strings or sign-ons, and that they work now within dashboards and data modules. So to show you that, I have to show you a data source. So if you're not an administrator, you may never have seen this screen. But the idea here is that with data sources, when I create them, I have the potential to connect to more than one database if I wish. And for each connection, I have the opportunity to use more than one sign-on to that database if I wish. Now I've configured this Great Outdoors Sales data source to have 2 sign-ons. Now, in previous releases, the package that uses these this data source worked perfectly fine in reports, and it would prompt me for which sign-on to use because I have access to both. If I only had access to one of them, then I wouldn't get prompted at all. If I have access to more than one connection or sign-on, I get asked, which one would you like to use? And that worked perfectly in reports. But when I used that package that uses this data source in a dashboard, it didn't work. Depending on which release you were in, your mileage would vary in terms of whether it would give you an error message that was specifically about this or whether it would just not work and you wouldn't really quite know why. Now it works, so we haven't got to worry about whether the error message is graceful or not. Let me go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. So I have a package called Go Sales Query that uses this Great Outdoors Sales data source. My data source has 2 sign-ons. I happen to have access to both. Because I have access to both, in order to run a report or a dashboard, I have to tell Cognos which sign-on to use for that run. So let me go ahead and create a dashboard from that package that uses that data source. So I will navigate to the package, which is out here under Samples Models, and it's Go Sales Query, which is using that data source. Now let's suppose that what I want to do is I want to create a visualization using some of this data. And I'll show you those label enhancements here. So I'm going to throw some product information on. And now that it's reading the database, it's got to ask me, which sign-on do I wish to use? Because I have access to both. Remember, in this world, guys, multiple connections, multiple sign-ons, the only time this prompt will come up is if the user could access more than one. If the user only has access to one, they'll never see this. If the user has access to more than one, like I do, they'll see and they'll be asked to pick a connection or a sign-on. Now I won't be asked anymore, at least I shouldn't be. Let me go ahead and drop in some more data. And I am going to move this widget a little, and then I'm going to change the widget to a different type so that I can show you this, some of these new features. So I'm going to go to a tree map, and so there is my tree map. So first, let me just reiterate the sign-on notion. Before this release, the 2 sign-ons would prevent me from using this package. I couldn't use this package to develop or run a dashboard or use this package in a data module. Now it simply prompts me, just like it prompts me when I use reports. So that's the first enhancement I want to show you. The second enhancement has to do with the property sheet for this visualization. This happens to be one of the visualizations that includes those new properties. Contrast label color. This, I would expect, will update the color of these labels so that if the tool believes that they are not clearly seeable, it will update the color. Did any color update? Doesn't look like it did. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my color palette to one that includes, see now here, you see how with it off you can't even see the mountaineering equipment label? But with the contrast label color turned on, Cognos changes automatically that label color based on the palette, the background color, if you will, being so dark so now I can see it. So that's what this guy does. Available on some but not all visualizations. Label shadow, if you take a quick I'm going to turn it on, you'll see all of the labels will update with a shadow. Okay, so those are the two new capabilities in terms of just making the labels and if you will, adjusting the label contrast so that they're more readable in a visualization. So I wanted to show you that while I was here in the dashboard, just so that you could see that as well. Okay, so multiple sign-ons, multiple connection strings supported fully now in dashboards and data modules. And both in reports and in dashboards, some visualizations will include new label contrast type properties so that you can more clearly see the labels in some of these visualizations. Here, I'm going to go ahead and remove this dashboard and move on to another demonstration. Quickly, I'll show you sharing a folder just so you can see. Let me go backwards here. Here's a folder, standard reports. Maybe I wanted to send a quick link to standard reports to somebody. I can right click or I can choose the more button. Same thing. Click on share and now I have this link that I can copy and I can paste into an email or into a web page or wherever a link could be used, and people can click on it. They will need to log into Cognos. Maybe you have single sign-on, maybe you don't, but they would need to log into Cognos, and they would have to have access to this folder for the link to work. But now I can create these links, whereas in previous releases I could not. I could only do them on reports like this one. And then on reports and dashboards, I have this embed, which gives me code for an iframe as opposed to code for a link in a web page or in an email. So that's sharing now, and you can share on a folder. There's a sample story out here. Let me just give you a notion of this change in the stories. So if I go to the stories, let me go ahead and open this most valuable customers story. So again, stories are, if you will, they're dashboards with animation, scenes, and timing. And the idea is that you would present your presentation not using PowerPoint necessarily, but you would use a story instead. You would present connected to Cognos Analytics. But in order to do each scene, right, I click and it's going to run this scene, and then I would click and I would click on next scene, and then it would bring up the next scene, and then I'd hit play and it would run through my scene and so on. So you see I'm in charge of the timing and when scenes change and so on. And that's what I was able to do up until this release. Now with this release, I can instead go to the gear here. I'll turn on play all scenes and loop. And what you'll see this does is I also just went to full screen. Is it will actually just go ahead and play through the timing, the scenery, and so on. And then because I clicked loop, when I get to the end of this particular story, which happens to have 5 scenes, so I think this is scene 3. When I get to the end of the story, it will start over at the beginning. So that is this notion here of playing all scenes and looping. The play all scenes, this is going to run, in this case, from scene 1 through scene 5. And it will do that automatically. I don't have to click next scene and that kind of stuff. And then loop, after this scene finishes here in about 6 seconds, means start over at the beginning and replay the entire story. So there we are. So that's the new capability in the world of stories, is this play all scenes and loop capability. I'll remove that guy. Let's go ahead and create a report that includes latitude and longitude map. Now to do that, I have a spreadsheet that I previously uploaded. I just want to show you what's in the spreadsheet here. So this is a collection of data. It's, as you can see, it's ghost sales type data. But the most important thing is this data has latitude and longitude coordinates for each row. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to plot some of the data, probably revenue, from this data set on a report. So I uploaded this data to Cognos earlier, only because it's a large spreadsheet and it takes a minute or so to load, and I didn't want to waste your time. So this spreadsheet is right here, preloaded. Now, to write a report from an uploaded spreadsheet, I first have to create a data module that includes the spreadsheet. Whoops. So I'm going to click New Data Module, and I'm going to say, let's use an uploaded file. I'll get to that Ghost Sales Geo file here, and I will simply add it to my data module. These are all the columns that were in my spreadsheet. Now, you notice that it automatically detected that these items, addresses, lat and long, city, state, these are geographic. It determined that a date is time. Order number and code and so on are numeric, but they're not measures that I roll up. And quantity and revenue are measures that I roll up. So, it's done some clever interpretation of my data. Perhaps it wasn't clever enough. This is my chance to change it. Turns out it's exactly right in this case, because it's demo data, right? So those always try to work out well. I'm going to save this data module so that I can write a report from this uploaded file. I'm going to call it geodata out in my content. Come back to data module for one last demo, provided we have time here. But with geodata, I'm going to create a report. And that report is going to include a visualization from the new visualization library, which is the default library. In there is a map. This is the new map that leverages the partnership between IBM and Mapbox. And remember, none of your data goes to Mapbox, but Mapbox provides the base maps. And this now has 3 layers, whereas it used to have 2 in the previous release. And that new layer is this latitude-longitude layer. So I'm going to populate this latitude-longitude layer. And I'm going to grab latitude and drop it where you'd expect. And I'll drop longitude where you'd expect. And I'm going to use quantity to add color to my points. And I'm going to use the address as my label, just so that I have that layer. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to go ahead and add a region layer. And again, the location here, though, is going to be state, right? Because see, on the location, on the region and on the points, I can do down to zip code. Only on the latitude, longitude can I get to a coordinate. So I'll go ahead and use a second layer here. I'll throw my state as my location, and I'll use revenue as my color. And I believe just like that, I will get a map. And I should get a collection of data. Now, my spreadsheet was limited to the US, which is why the data is over here in the US. You know what? I'm going to quickly make a change to the map property in terms of size, because I think that it would look better a little bit wider there. So that'll be a little bit bigger map. So here's my map. And when it comes up, you'll see that I've got the 2 layers. I have a layer that is the state, and remember state was revenue. And I have a layer that is latitude, longitude. Remember, I labeled the points in the latitude, longitude with the address line, and I was plotting quantity. Now I'm going to click and zoom around this map so I can just show you the two layers. So there's my region layer, and here are some of my coordinates, my coordinate layer. And so fundamentally, I now have maps that can be 1, 2, or 3 layers of information that I can leverage using the built-in spatial analytics in Cognos. Now, I'm not going to be able to show you absolutely everything of this next demo, but I did want to talk to you about this custom image library. Out on your Cognos Analytics server, my friends, in the installation folder, you'll find a folder called samples. In the samples, you're going to find a bunch of samples that are described in the Managing Cognos Analytics book. The extensions include the ability to create this custom image library. And one of the samples for out here is called Custom Media All. And it's the Custom Media All one that creates the image library sample set for both dashboards and reports. Custom Media Dashboards only, Custom Medium All, Dashboards and Reports. What you do is you download that from your Cognos server. You extract that guy into a folder. There'll be two things, a spec.json and an images file. The images for your library go here in images. And you see I added, after downloading this file, an LPA logo. Now, you could replace one of these images with your logo and leave the names the same. Not sure that that makes a whole lot of sense. What I did instead is I added my logo to the spec.json. Now again, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time going through the spec.json. But what I did is I copied this part, pasted it again, and added in the information about my logo into this guy. Zipped it all back up. That's important. And then I uploaded it on my Cognos server, so to the customization world. So went to extensions, clicked upload, grabbed that zip file, and Cognos loaded it in. That created my custom image library. The images are going to be these images. To leverage a custom image, I would go to a report or a dashboard. Here, let me go to just create a quick new report. I will go to my toolbox, add an image tool to my report, double click on it, and you see my image library is here, including my logo. So now I have a quick and easy way to access certain images very simply in a dashboard or a report. Of course, I could still click that browse button and browse to any image. That's the functionality from previous versions. This ability to have the custom image library that comes up when you first add an image like that. That's the new piece. Managing Cognos Analytics is the book you want to find for that particular example. So we have a minute or two for some questions. I apologize, there's not much time left for questions, but I'll remind you that I will answer all the questions you've submitted directly after this webinar. So the first question is, will data sets handle millions of rows? Yes, I'm not aware of any practical limit to how many rows a data set will be able to manage. I have created data sets of millions of rows. There's no real reason why it wouldn't handle billions of rows. I guess from the point of view of IBM hasn't built in any specific limitations. Of course, it might take a good long time to load that many rows. And do remember it's being stored in your content store, right? But there's no practical limit or documented limit to the number of rows that a data set can handle. Can I customize the look and feel of the dashboard colors with custom palettes? This comes up every time I talk with Cognos product management about dashboards. It is absolutely on the roadmap. It's always on the roadmap list. For that matter, so is drill-throughs from dashboards, always on the roadmap list. And they just haven't articulated what release it'll be in as yet. It is not in release 8. Can I run a map to a PDF? I believe not, but heck, while we're here, let's find out. I'll go ahead and click on the run and run it to PDF. I believe the answer is that it will tell you the display adapter will not function in that format. I don't believe PDFs are supported as yet. Yeah. So that is a no, at least a no for at this time. These interactive maps only run in HTML. Now, remember, you still have the map info maps from the data container tool world. You also have in the visualization world, you have the maps that are in the legacy visualizations. And I think they're called interactive maps here, maybe. Dynamic maps, pardon me. And these will run in other formats. It is only the map box, the new visualizations, the interactive maps that need to be run in an interactive format, which is HTML. Well, I'm getting the high sign that I have gone over my time limit. So again, let me apologize to those of you who submitted questions that I haven't gotten to. After the webinar is over, I will get a list of all those questions and we will absolutely respond to your questions via email. So what remains is for me to say thank you very much. I appreciate that you spent another hour with me today. I hope you found it informative. Until we meet again, when we talk perhaps about release 11.09, I hope you have a wonderful end of year and that your new year, which isn't that far away, is great and prosperous. Thanks so much.